What if the greatest empire in Indian history wasn't built on war, but on compassion? What if a conqueror, feared across continents, looked upon a battlefield drenched in blood, and instead of seeking more power, he sought peace? This is not the story of a king who conquered lands. It's the story of an emperor who conquered himself. The story of Ashoka the Great, the Mauryan ruler who turned from a ruthless warrior to a philosopher king, and built an empire not of swords, but of Dhamma. Long before history called him Ashoka the Great, he was known as Chandashoka, Ashoka the Fierce. Born into the mighty Mauryan dynasty around 304 BCE, he was the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, who had established one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. Ashoka's rise to power was not one of peace or inheritance, it was one of blood. After the death of his father, Emperor Bindusara, Ashoka fought his own brothers in a brutal struggle for the throne. By the time he emerged victorious, the royal court whispered his name in fear. His eyes were sharp, his will unbending, and his ambition limitless. Once crowned emperor, Ashoka extended his dominion across the Indian subcontinent. From the Himalayas in the north to the southern peninsulas, from modern-day Afghanistan to Bengal, his armies crushed every rebellion that dared to rise. But in the 8th year of his reign came the turning point, the Kalinga War. Kalinga, a prosperous and independent state on the eastern coast, refused to bow to Mauryan authority. Ashoka sent a massive army to subdue it. And what followed was one of the bloodiest wars in ancient history. Historical inscriptions record that over 100,000 people were killed and more than 150,000 were deported. The battlefield of Kalinga, once fertile and green, became a graveyard. When Ashoka rode across that devastation, corpses piled high, families torn apart, rivers running red. Something inside him broke. The emperor who had once believed in conquest now found himself haunted by the cries of the dying. He wrote later in his edicts, "Even 100th or 1,000th part of those who died then would now be unbearable for me." It was here, among ashes and ruin, that Ashoka's transformation began. In the silence that followed the war, Ashoka sought meaning. He turned not to generals, but to monks. He began studying the teachings of the Buddha, but what he discovered went beyond religion. He realized that an empire could not stand forever on fear and violence. Its foundation must be moral, not military. From this conviction arose his greatest idea, Dhamma, but make no mistake, Ashoka's Dhamma was not simply Buddhism. It was a universal code of ethics, a way of life that transcended faiths and castes. It preached compassion, respect, truthfulness, and tolerance. He saw Dhamma as a tool to bind a diverse, sprawling empire together, a shared moral contract between ruler and ruled. To spread his message, Ashoka did something revolutionary, or he wrote it in stone. Across his empire, he erected Edicts of Ashoka, inscriptions carved on rocks and pillars in languages common to the people, Prakrit, Greek, Aramaic. These edicts were not royal decrees of power, they were moral reminders. All men are my children. There is no gift greater than the gift of Dhamma. Conquest by Dhamma is the truest conquest. For the first time in human history, a ruler used statecraft not to glorify himself, but to spread ethics. Ashoka's Dhamma wasn't confined to philosophy, it was lived, practiced, and enforced through policy. He built hospital, not only for humans, but for animals. He ordered trees to be planted along roads and wells to be dug for travelers. He commissioned rest houses and shade shelters, promoting welfare as a state duty. In a time when kings were often worshipped as gods, Ashoka became a servant of the people. He sent Dhamma Mahamatras, officers of morality, to ensure justice and compassion reached every corner of his empire. He abolished harsh punishments, restricted hunting, and encouraged kindness to all living beings. Perhaps his most remarkable act was his stance on religious tolerance. In a subcontinent of many faiths, Brahmanism, Jainism, Buddhism, Ajivika, he preached respect, not dominance. One should not glorify one's own sect and condemn others, he wrote. Harmony is good, and all sects deserve respect. In an age of imperial propaganda, Ashoka's edicts stood as early testaments to pluralism, centuries ahead of their time. And while other rulers spread their power with armies, Ashoka spread his ideas with missionaries. He sent emissaries to Sri Lanka, Burma, Egypt, and even Greece, carrying the message of Dhamma, not with swords, but with words. In doing so, he transformed his empire into a moral force, and India into the spiritual heart of Asia. Centuries later, long after the Mauryan Empire had faded, Ashoka's pillars still stood, silent but unbroken. When India gained independence in 1947, it was his lion capital at Sarnath that was chosen as the national emblem. 4 lions facing the 4 directions, symbolizing courage, peace, and justice. Even the wheel on the Indian flag, the Ashoka Chakra, comes from his edicts, representing the eternal motion of Dhamma, of righteousness in life. But Ashoka's influence didn't stop at India's borders. His embrace of Buddhist ideals turned the faith from a regional movement into a global philosophy. From the temples of Sri Lanka to the pagodas of Myanmar, from Thailand to Japan, Ashoka's missionaries carried not just religion, but a message of compassion that would shape entire civilizations. In many ways, Ashoka was the world's first ethical emperor, a ruler who placed morality above might. His reign remains one of history's most astonishing experiments, an attempt to govern an empire through empathy. Yet, as history teaches us, ideals are fragile in the hands of men. After Ashoka's death around 232 BCE, the Mauryan Empire began to decline rapidly. His successors lacked his vision and discipline. The administrative machinery he built began to fracture. Regional governors sought autonomy, and within 50 years, the empire splintered into smaller kingdoms. Many historians ask, was Ashoka's Dhamma too idealistic to survive? Did his focus on morality weaken the empire's military strength? Did his renunciation of conquest make the state vulnerable to internal decay? These are questions that continue to haunt scholars. But perhaps the true measure of Ashoka's success was not in the longevity of his empire, but in the endurance of his ideas. Empires rise and fall. That is history's rhythm. But Ashoka's Dhamma outlived his palaces, his armies, and even his dynasty. It survives today in India's constitution, in its symbols, in its ideals of secularism and compassion. It lives in the teachings of peace that echo through Buddhist temples across the world. And most importantly, it lives in the idea that true greatness is not in ruling others, but in mastering oneself. Ashoka's story is not one of perfection. It is the story of a man who saw the darkness of his own making and chose to walk into the light. In an age defined by power, he redefined leadership as empathy. In a world torn by conquest, he taught that real victory lies in conscience. More than 2,000 years later, his message remains as urgent as ever. Empires built on fear crumble, but those built on Dhamma, on truth, justice, and compassion, endure in the hearts of humanity forever. Ashoka's empire may have vanished, but his Dhamma still speaks, carved not in stone, but in spirit. If you believe history's greatest revolutions begin not with bloodshed, but with enlightenment, like, share, and subscribe to Historian Baba. Because here, we don't just tell history, we we rediscover its soul.